Hey guys, my name is Jessica Keppen, and for my project I decided to look into how seasons affect the load factor for United Airlines domestic flights. So first I just kind of wanted to review quickly what load factor was. So load factor is the proportion of an airline's seats that are filled by revenue passengers. We calculate that by dividing our revenue passenger miles by our available seat miles, and it's essentially how full the aircraft is. There's many common factors that affect the load factor, but just to go over a couple: routes, so basically how desirable that specific route is, configuration of cabin, so whether passengers are buying more first class tickets versus economy, and then also day of the week, so if we're flying on a weekend versus a weekday, maybe somewhere close to the holidays. But basically, my hypothesis was that individual locations would affect load factor depending on the time of the year at that location. I decided to pick United because I've always really liked that airline. But I was looking at all this data and I figured that since United has such a diverse hub structure all throughout the US, I thought that the load factor would pretty much even itself out, which we'll take a look at. So I looked at all of their airports that United goes to. This is specifically 2015 I stuck with, 2015 data. And just for all of their airports, you can see that it's basically during their summer months when they have the highest load factor. So that June, July, August time period is when their load factor was the greatest. But then I wanted to look at their specific hubs and see if that location changed the seasonal load factor as well. So the first one is Chicago. And if we look at Chicago, it's pretty constant. July and August are pretty much their top or highest load factor for Chicago's base, whereas January, February, those months are pretty low. And that kind of makes sense. People are wanting to travel more in the summertime in Chicago, whereas they have a lot of snow in the wintertime, and people aren't leaving as much. And it was kind of the same way for Denver. As you can see here, January, February, pretty low load factors compared to the March through October months. So it was a little bit different for Denver in the sense that it was more than just the summer months, but it really wasn't off that much, as you can tell. So that was one thing I took into consideration when going over all of this data as well. So the next is Houston. Once again, Houston stayed pretty constant. June and July were the top months as far as load factor goes, whereas the whole rest of the year was pretty low for Houston. So location changed maybe the load factor a hair, but it's still mostly the summer months in which people are deciding to travel and fill up those seats, fill up those planes as well. So the next one is going to be Los Angeles. Los Angeles, once again, June, July, August, highest months for load factor, or you're filling up the most seats during those months, whereas the rest of the year remains pretty constant throughout. So what this data is telling me as I'm looking at all of this is that really the place doesn't matter. It's the season that's pretty much the main thing. And here at Newark as well, you can see that July and August are the highest months, whereas the whole rest of the year remains pretty constant. There are some fluctuations, but it's within 1% of each other. So when I was looking over all of my data, I was concluding that the place really didn't matter. It was more of the seasonal month. And then once again, San Francisco, I just wanted to go through all of the hubs for United just to show you guys how consistent it stayed. San Francisco was the one that was actually really close together. I mean, June was a high month, as you can tell, but all the rest of the months, despite January and February, were pretty close together for San Francisco, so they seem to keep a pretty common load factor throughout the year other than January and February in San Francisco as well. And the next one is going to be Washington Dulles. And once again, June, July, August, highest months, whereas the rest of the year remained pretty low. So I got to go through all of these hubs and basically came to the conclusion that the location wasn't a factor with load factor. It was all about the seasonal months, and summer was the primary time that people are wanting to travel. They're wanting to fill up those seats. So that was pretty interesting to me, because I would have thought that the certain place and the season at that place would have been more of a factor, but it turns out it's just the season in general which affects the way people want to travel. So why does this matter to airlines? Depending on the time of year, airlines may actually decrease the amount of flights and or put tickets on sale to try and compensate for that drop in load factor. So those months like January and February that we saw were pretty low. They might actually, decrease the amount of flights or try to get some sales going to compensate for that drop in load factor, because they know it's going to happen just for those certain months because of that time of year, as it's proven through the data that it's usually pretty constant. So my conclusion was my hypothesis that diverse hub locations would even out the load factor across all seasons was found to be untrue. Regardless of location, load factor was significantly higher in the summertime than in the winter. So location isn't a huge factor. It's all about those seasonal changes in those summer months is when people want to travel. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.